Coalition in partnership with the Stanford Center for Integrated Facility Engineering and the UC Davis Belotham Center. As we all know, it has been a very difficult year for all of us due to the multiple crises of a global pandemic, heightened racialized violence, and economic downturns. It has also been especially difficult for our essential workers in our region and around the world. We're thinking about the folks who clean our homes and our offices, the folks who care for our children and our elderly, and the people who prepare our food. And although essential workers enable our communities to live, often calling them heroes, the pandemic has shown us that we have much to do to truly protect workers and their families in their workplaces and in their homes. And so today, during our briefing, we will be presenting new data around workers' rights issues, especially around wage theft, health and safety issues, and more. We'll also be sharing the Silicon Valley Workers Stories Project, which captured the narratives of immigrant essential workers across Santa Clara County, and also launching the Wage Theft Coalition's second report, Building Worker Power, which presents data on wage theft and workers' rights issues in the county. We will also be having worker leaders, researchers, advocates, and elected officials speak on their experiences and around key legislation, both regionally and statewide, to further build the movement for workers and immigrant rights. So as more of you all come in, we're just getting started. If you can all please, one, mute yourselves just so we can hear the speakers who are speaking. And if you haven't done so already, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat in terms of who you are, where are you calling in from, and also which organization or position that you are representing. To kick us off for today's briefing, I would like to invite State Senator Dave Cortese to speak, who is the chair of the Senate Labor Committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for inviting me to participate. We've had this on the calendar for some time, but it's always a question in Sacramento whether or not your schedule is going to hold up with sudden 4 sessions called and committee hearings, and especially now with COVID-19, probably heard the term early action items, which means budget decisions are being made out of cycle. Things that are usually agreed to as part of the larger budget, the entire budget on a fiscal year that starts in July are now, being pushed out, of course, because of reasons of economic stimulus, reasons of safety net services, reasons of protecting people, of course, whether it's landlord tenants or whatever. So it's a busy time here, but we haven't lost sight at all of the issues that you're going to be talking about today, wage theft particularly. And let me just give you an example of that. We have just passed out of the committee that I chair, and I'm fortunate to chair it, by the way. I'm a freshman chairing the Senate Labor Committee, which is pretty rare. I'm fortunate, I think, because of my background in Santa Clara County, fighting hard to create an Office of Labor Standards Enforcement, fighting hard along with Ruth and others who are on this Zoom to get wage theft language put into ordinance form and many other worker protection efforts in Santa Clara County. I think I came up here with some sort of credentials that made the pro tem think that I might be an adequate chair for the Labor Committee. And I've enjoyed that work as hard as it is. I've enjoyed it thus far. And in that committee, we passed just recently SB 62, the Garment Workers Protection Act. That still has to go to the Assembly and to the floor for a vote, but I have high hopes for it. Senator DeRosso has been leading that effort, and that proposes an hourly wage for garment workers as opposed to piece rate. That industry has been chronically plagued with wage theft issues for years and years, and felt it was about time to put some real reforms there and create accountability throughout the stream of commerce so that contractors or folks who are contracting out that work, or at least have in the past, can't hide behind a veil of corporate protection or say that, we're once removed from the violation, so we're not responsible. That's all changed in SB 62, and you may have taken a look at it already. Just yesterday, I was able to get my own bill out of committee and on its way to further processing in the Assembly, and obviously it'll have to come back to the floor, but it's called SB 411 or 411. You can take your pick there. That was sponsored by the California School Employees Association. And what this does is we have a codified set of rules now under PEPRA, under the pension rules, that say when an employee works 960 hours post-retirement for a pensionable in what would otherwise be a pensionable position, if they go over 960 hours, they have violated the law. They have to disgorge any money they received after that point, or they're forced out of retirement. It's extremely painful for a lot of people. We had one case recently where the person went over the 960 hours by 62 and a half hours and earned less than $1,200 in excess wages and was asked to repay. They don't, in the past, not enough pressure has been put on the pension system itself, in my opinion, to watch that 960 hours, make sure people are alerted, make sure they're protected, make sure they're not caught in a trap. And this bill will take care of that. It gives flexibility when that 960-hour limit is reached to settle that situation with the employee without back charging them tens of thousands of dollars in pay. I'll wrap up here in just a second, but I want to tell you also yesterday and prior to yesterday, we have taken up a number of bills, really with our main allies being the Teamsters around port truck drivers who have been misclassified, much like garment workers in some sense. It's an industry where misclassification, evading the employment rules, putting people to work without paying their contributions into the system, whether it be Social Security or unemployment insurance or whatever. This has been a mainstay of that industry, if you will. And the bills, SB 338, SB 700, AB 798, those are all attacking that problem. And one of those bills we just got out of committee yesterday. So I just want to give you a flavor for what's going on. I want to let you know that as you keep pressing these efforts at the city level, at the county level, like we did in Santa Clara County, that some of these issues are really getting traction here at the state level in the state legislature. Those were just a few of the efforts. There are more, but I wanted to let you know, we know that we have problems in this arena. We know here at the state level, and when I say we, I mean my colleagues in the state Senate know that a lot more has to be done. And we know beyond these bills that try to create accountability in these systems, we have an enforcement problem at the state level. People violate the rules, as you well know, because you're all advocates in the Wage Theft Coalition. People get nailed for wage theft and then never have to pay because no one ever comes along to enforce, collect the money, and return it to the employee. So we're on it. We'll stay on it, and we'd love to keep working with you on these issues until we get them resolved. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Senator Cortese, for joining us and for kind of giving us a landscape of what it's looking like right now in the Senate to protect workers' rights. And so we thank you for your efforts. I also want to acknowledge a lot of our other elected officials on the local level as well who are joining us. I see Rebecca Armendariz, who is a city council member with the city of Gilroy, Lucas Ramirez, who is a vice mayor of the city of Mountain View. Yes, feel free to wave if you can. I also want to acknowledge Peter Ortiz, who is a board member of the Santa Clara County Board of Education, Brian Wheatley, who is a trustee of San Jose Unified School District. And I also saw in the chat a representative from San Jose City Council member, Maya Esparza. So I want to really thank all of the representatives who are fighting the good fight and really pushing for policies that are really protecting our workers and their families. And so thank you all so much. And if folks can kind of put in the chat some warm comments and greetings to these folks who are sharing their time and providing their time today. To continue the flow for today's briefing, I really want to start us off by sharing a little bit about our work in terms of collecting the narratives and sharing the stories of immigrant essential workers on the ground in Santa Clara County. So I'm just sharing my screen really briefly with you all. Let me know if you can see this. So the Silicon Valley Workers Stories Project was a project that was started by the Wage Theft Coalition about a year ago in April when the pandemic was just getting started. This picture is a picture taken by Christine Jill Aguilar, who is a volunteer photographer with us. And she was able to kind of capture the everyday experiences of immigrant workers in Santa Clara County. And one of the workers here is a caregiver, and really shows her daily commute, going to work day in, day out, to her job on public transit, right, on VTA. And so I think that this picture is a really great way to start, because I think it really roots us on why we do this work, why we are here at 10 a.m. Listening to these stories and really understanding why we have to push forth the policies that we have to push forth on the local level and statewide. So in April 2020, the Wage Theft Coalition developed this Lifting Workers' Stories team with organizations like the Stanford for Workers' Rights organization, which is really fighting for the rights of janitorial and service workers on Stanford's campus who were laid off and didn't really receive continuation pay. And they also partnered with the UC Davis Bolosan Center for Filipinx Studies, which really has a mission around migrant workers' rights, both in California, but also nationally. And also, in terms of this partnership, we were able to kind of create this process to capture the testimonies of workers on the ground, from the fast food industry, caregiving, day work to janitorial staff. And so what we did was that we gathered this team of volunteers, students, researchers from across the state. We actually had volunteers in Alabama who were helping us out. And we developed a set of interview questions to really understand what was actually happening on the ground in terms of their workplaces, what was their commute like, were they experiencing any health and safety violations, or were they getting the PPEs that they needed? And also, most importantly, what are the policy demands or the things that they would like to see in order to protect them in their workplace and in their homes? And so we were able to go through interview trainings. We transcribed and translated stories from various languages, from Spanish, Tagalog to Farsi. And as a team, we were really just in deep conversation with immigrant workers and listened to their experiences of what they were going through during this time of crisis. And so in this past year, we've had a lot of victories. We've gathered about 32 in-depth interviews from workers across different industries. We were able to lead interviews, not just from the researcher to the worker, but worker leaders themselves were interviewing other coworkers, other loved ones about their experiences, which I thought was really powerful, and even a process of empowerment for a lot of the workers. A lot of them felt seen and heard. And for a lot of them, they felt that it was very healing to really just talk about their experiences on the ground. And so we were able to interview worker leaders from Powys, who will speak later, from folks from 5 for 15, the Day Worker Center. I even interviewed my own mom and my own relatives who are working in healthcare, and we were able to kind of bring together all these stories. We also had 34 volunteers, as I shared, to translate, transcribe, analyze the stories, disseminate them. We had volunteers who were photographing workers. We even had a volunteer team who helped design our website and our report. And so right now, these stories are being housed digitally on our website. And so if one of our co-hosts can share the link in the chat, we'd love to share with you our launch of this website and share with you the Silicon Valley Workers Stories Project website to you all, which I can give you all a preview here. So this is our website, which houses the worker stories that we gathered, as well as our wage theft report. And as you can see, it kind of provides a brief background and an analysis of workers' experiences, shares our history, our report, as well as different quotes from workers' stories. So we have all the stories here from these different industries. And I know that as advocates, I feel like one of the most powerful things and powerful tools that we can utilize is the stories of people themselves, because I feel like that's kind of the thing that people remember when we push for different policies and bills, is the people who are behind it. And so we really hope that this database is a resource for you all. I know there's also some educators on the line. I hope that these stories can also be used in your curriculums in terms of teaching about immigrant and workers' rights. And I wanted to share one story from a fast food worker that was interviewed. Her name is Ramona, and we can close here. But this is a picture taken by Brooke Anderson at one of the fast food 5 for 15 protests last year fighting for PPEs. So Ramona is a McDonald's worker in San Jose, and she escaped a violent home life in Mexico to raise her children because there was more safety and opportunity here in the United States. And what I really love about this interview is that even though she's faced a lot of obstacles in her workplace at McDonald's, she was able to use her voice for change and to really lift up the demands of other essential frontline staff and coworkers during these times. And these are some of her own words, and this was translated. But she says, I preferred to leave home before something would happen to me. At my job there, some guy had asked me if I wanted to help at work, and I said no. But my dad beat me because he said I was flirting. My dad left me in a pool of blood when he hit me, and my boss had to come and get me. And then she says, right in her process of empowerment, she says, right now, what is important for me is to have a union. I tried to talk to coworkers to let them know that they don't have to put up with these problems. Lots of workers are scared to join in on the fight for their rights. But McDonald's is like a mafia, for example, that plays favoritism. There are workers who do things to get better treatment from managers. I don't do that. I know that we shouldn't try to kiss up by doing things outside of doing a good job. Our work should speak for us. They, McDonald's, have paid me when I had to take time off for quarantine. I made a complaint video, and this helped so we can get PPEs right away. And so I share Ramona's story because I think, she has experienced a lot of violence, both before the pandemic and during it. But what she has done by sharing her story is to really push for demands from her other coworkers and for her herself. And so I'll be sharing the link to the workers' stories websites, which you can find here. You can go to workers-stories.org to find our report, to look at more summaries of different workers in different industries. We have a database for fast food, caregiving, healthcare. And also we have workers' stories from the Stanford Workers' Rights Group who were interviewing janitorial staff on campus. And lastly, I really want to thank all the volunteers and partners and workers who made this happen and for sharing their stories. I know it's not easy. These stories are all anonymized, by the way. And so we've done our best to really conceal the identity of these workers just because it's such a tenuous time right now. But really, this project took a lot of hours and a lot of energy. And so we really want to thank everyone for making this happen and for contributing what they could during this time. And so with that, I'm going to stop my share. I'll share the link to the websites throughout. If you have any questions, feel free to also put that in the chat. Next up, I want to invite Forrest Peterson to share his insights around the data that we collected around wage theft in Santa Clara County.
Thank you, Catherine. I appreciate that. So as Catherine introduced, my name is Forrest Peterson. I have a doctorate from Stanford University, from the School of Engineering. And so data is something that I live with every day. And so when I was invited to work on this project, of course, I jumped at that opportunity. And during this time, I was working in the days as the first Santa Clara County labor standards investigator in the office that Senator Cortese created at Santa Clara County to look at issues like this. And being the first labor standards investigator, of course, in an early office in the middle of a COVID pandemic, most of my time was spent looking at workers' protections from COVID-19 in the workplace and trying to work with those data sets. And so, of course, working here with Catherine on this data set, this was my evening opportunity. So as soon as I clocked out from the county, I clocked into this project. And this is an extraordinary data set. It's a difficult data set to work with. Having a PhD from Stanford University, working with artificial intelligence and data sets as for many years of my life, this was still a very difficult data set to work with, but it's an extraordinary data set and we're very lucky to have it. So these data are a combination of the Department of Labor wage and hour division cases, and not all those result in judgments. Many times the workers simply have life, and attending court cases and following up on your own rights isn't necessarily your first priority when you're simply trying to live and eat. And so many cases I saw drop off the record. This is also data from the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement judgments and the San Jose Office of Enforcement cases. These data are internally incomplete, and they don't include private lawsuits, stop notices, complaints to awarding agencies, contractor, employment departments, licensing boards, etc., district attorneys. So there's a large amount of data that doesn't end up in the data set because one way or another, the cases are pushed aside before they ever become a full violation. And so therefore, the following is a sample. Given the above constraints and the reluctance by populations to file wage and hour claims, I'm even reluctant to file a wage claim if I was employed. And in the past I have, and I did not file because I was worried about my job or my reputation. So I can imagine somebody that doesn't have a lot of the opportunity that I have would be even more scared to file a claim. So in total, in the data set for just Santa Clara County, there's 33,000 employees represented, and that's 75,600 violations, which represents $130 million. And that's a lot. Each one of these shouldn't happen. And so the construction industry is one of the leading sources of wage theft. This is a leading industry for theft in the cities of San Jose, Santa Clara, Cupertino, and Mountain View. There's 18,000 wage theft cases in the construction in those cities, resulting in a total of $100 million in stolen wages. And of that, only 10% has been recovered. So that comprises 63,000 discrete wage and hour violations affecting 24,000 workers. And there's thousands of employers that have multiple cases. This isn't talking to one of the other investigators, they call them frequent flyers. And so these companies, like electronics manufacturer Sanmina SCI, the construction industry Jason Associates, and the venture capital tech startup Index Life Car, and even the well-known LinkedIn, have each failed to pay hundreds of thousands in back wages as some of the region's biggest failures. Other industries come in a close second, and in some cities, these are the top source of theft, such as the 1,800 victims of theft in the care home industry just in Sunnyvale alone, and the 1,300 victims of theft in the fast food industry just in Palo Alto. So on average, each worker loses $4,000 out of their wages, which represents 10% of their earnings. And of that, 90% is never seen again. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Forrest. I would like to invite Ruth Silvertop to share more about our wage theft report. I've also put a link to the report as well if you would like to follow along.
Thank you, Catherine. Unlike the first wage theft report, which focuses solely on wage theft and policy recommendations, this report also highlights issues that intersect with unpaid wage theft judgments, including retaliation, which is a huge problem, as Forrest mentioned, racial inequities, workplace health and safety violations, and labor trafficking against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as their adverse impacts on the real earnings of already low-wage workers during the pandemic. The historical and ongoing struggle for racial and social justice critically informs the findings in this report. Wage theft and other workers' rights violations disproportionately impact people of color, immigrant workers, and women. The report also summarizes key advocacy and organizing victories since the last report in 2015, which I will discuss shortly, and proposes further policy recommendations to eradicate wage theft and continue building worker power, which Michael Tyag will cover. The 2015 wage theft report noted that due to gaps in enforcing wage theft at government agencies, local governments increasingly play an important role in protecting workers. The coalition recommended that Santa Clara County and cities in the county implement policies to this end. First, we recommended the disclosure of unpaid wage theft judgments and revocation of business licenses and permits. Santa Clara County, San Jose, Sunnyvale, Milpitas, and Morgan Hill have enacted legislation that makes wage theft violators ineligible for business licenses and permits. Milpitas has enacted an ordinance that will deny a building permit and certificate of occupancy for failure to disclose or pay wage theft judgments. It's a priority in Mountain View. We recommended that cities enact laws that prohibit cities in the county from contracting with businesses with unpaid judgments. Santa Clara County, San Jose, Sunnyvale, Milpitas, and Morgan Hill have enacted legislation that prohibits the cities from contracting with businesses that have not paid wage theft judgments. We advocated for revocation of restaurant health permits if businesses don't pay judgments. And as you heard, and Senator Cortese and the other supervisors played a role, but he took the lead in creating an Office of Labor Standards Enforcement that revokes health permits of restaurants that don't pay wage theft judgments. We also advocated for outreach and education. At our recommendation, the Office of Labor Standards Enforcement operates a legal advice line supervised by a wage theft coalition attorney and staffed by attorneys who speak English, Spanish, Tagalog, Visayan, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and Hindi Punjabi, including 2 wage theft coalition attorneys. The Office of Labor Standards Enforcement Fair Workplace Collaborative now supports community organizations, including Powys Day Worker Center, Vietnamese American Roundtable, Working Partnerships USA, that conduct outreach, education, and awareness. More recently, the Santa Clara County Wage Theft Coalition partnered with Fight for 15 to advocate for a Santa Clara County referral, which will include the establishment of an advisory council that includes workers, advocates, county officials, and addresses abuses in the restaurant industry. At the state level, the coalition was the original sponsor of AB 1947 Ashkalra when it was first introduced. It was signed by the governor and went into effect this year, January 1st. It increases the statute of limitations for claims brought to the Labor Commission from 6 months to 1 year, and allows the court to award attorney's fees for claims brought under the whistleblower statute, Labor Code 1102.5. The coalition also was a co-sponsor of AB 3075, and the bill, that was Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher. The bill imposes successorship liability on an employer for any wages or penalties that are unpaid if the business is transferred to a family member, or if the same company is basically running the business, if they have the same facility and employees. And that was a way that businesses were able to evade judgment. So this closed the loophole. The bill was signed by the governor. So thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Ruth, for sharing. I would like to introduce Felwina Opisa-Mondina, who will discuss the problems that workers are experiencing every day, and will also introduce 2 of our worker leaders to speak.
Thank you, Kath. As pointed out by Ruth and in the coalition's 2015 report, wage theft is endemic in Santa Clara County. Our county is one of the most affluent county in the west coast of the United States, yet it has also the highest wage theft claims per capita. Even before the pandemic, workers, particularly low-wage earners, already face long-standing issues of wage theft, retaliation, discrimination, low wages, sexual harassment, labor trafficking, and safe working conditions, and lack of worker voice on the job. COVID-19, however, exacerbated employment disparities and illuminated the unacceptable working conditions of low-wage workers, the majority of them immigrants and people of color. Low-wage workers, such as those in the fast food and caregiving industries, must continue working throughout the pandemic and are therefore consistently at risk of exposure to the virus. We call them frontliners and essential. We honor them, we praise them, but for their employers, they remain dispensable and not worthy to be invested of PPEs or deserving of hazard pay, even as employers and businesses continue raking in profit at the expense of the health, safety, and lives of the workers. Today, We will hear from two amazing and brave workers representing the industries notorious of flouting workplace regulations, and it should not come as a surprise, also with the most number of wage theft complaints. The first worker speaker is a young and newly arrived immigrant working in a fast food chain in San Jose. He will share his struggles as an overworked, low-wage worker in an understaffed fast food store in the time of the pandemic. The second worker speaker is a victim of labor trafficking and has been working as a caregiver for almost 10 years. Despite suffering from an underlying condition and at higher risk of contracting the virus, she continues to work every day. Thank you, Clyde and Lala, for taking the time off today so that we will hear and be enlightened and inspired by your stories.
Hi everyone, I am Clyde Joshua Delgado. I'm a Filipino immigrant and I flew in with my family in the States back in August 2019. And, immediately we were faced with financial problems like rent, food, and bills. And because of that, I decided to work in fast food late January 2020. Just a month after I started, the pandemic hit and the United States went on lockdown. I was taken off the schedule because sales were really low and they needed to reduce worker hours. And after 2 weeks, I was urgently called back to work since some of the staff had resigned. That time, other fast food chains had closed down and people crowded into our store. Plus, the company implemented an online delivery system. The situation of the store was not ideal. Our kitchen crew had trouble with the volume of customers we had. Waiting times would reach up to 30 minutes for orders because we lacked equipment and staff. Then we also had trouble implementing social distancing, and customers would complain that staff were crowded in the front because of the little workspace we had. We also could not take our 10 minutes break, and we also could not take our 10 minutes rest breaks, or else people would be left doing too much in the front. And then at closing time, everyone would be exhausted, but still had to clean spotless because store auditing season was just around the corner. We would overperform and considerably exceed the daily goals to the point that we would break sales records. But when we say there's too much and we have to pause taking orders, the management forbids us. While our store is profiting, management still had little regard for our health and safety. Some days I heard coworkers got exposed to COVID and management would keep the news from us. There are no reports about them, and then we would only hear word from other coworkers. Management would also never inform us that we can take our 3 days paid sick leave and that we can avail the paid 80 hours supplemental COVID sick leave. I only knew about this information when I attended the PAWIS Know Your Rights training. And then there was also one instance when some coworkers had to work off the clock after 6 hours because they did not take a meal break and the management didn't want to pay for the penalty. Sadly, we continue to work without compensation despite the working conditions because for some of us immigrants that started our journey here in the United States, letting go of our jobs and maneuvering around a pandemic is walking on thin ice. So that is my experience. Thank you for listening.
Good morning, everyone, again. My name is Ranela Placides, also known as Lala. I am a caregiver in Santa Clara County and a member of PAWIS of South Bay. I was a victim of labor trafficking. I arrived in Washington, D.C. in March 2010 and later moved to California in April 2012. In California, my first job was a live-in caregiver in a care home, taking care of 3 patients 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And my monthly salary was just $1,200 per month. At the time of the shelter in place last year, I was working for 2 caregiving agencies that assigned me to work in private homes all around the county. As a caregiver and or domestic worker, I am considered a frontline or essential worker in these times of the pandemic. But I work in an industry that lacks employment standards. Caregivers like me continue putting our lives at risk as we provide care to those most vulnerable to illness, like seniors and people with compromised immune systems, keeping our clients out of our state's overwhelmed hospitals and nursing homes. Particularly for me, My work conditions at the time of the pandemic were really hard. My employer has reduced my work hours. Also, clients in private homes do not like to hire caregivers like me who are taking public transportation and going to work for fear that we will bring the virus to their homes. That is why even if my pay is very low, I am forced to take Uber to work just to be retained by my clients. This further decreased my income because Uber has become expensive. I have an underlying condition that requires me to undergo dialysis 3 times a week. This also affected my work schedule. It is hard to find the hours that will work around my dialysis appointments. This further reduced my capacity to work and, of course, my income. Sufficient PPE is really important for us, caregivers, as we take care of our clients. However, at the start of lockdown last year, and with the scarcity of PPEs, one of my employers just gave us 4 pieces of mask and told us to spray the mask with disinfectant and air dry it for reuse the next day. As regards to gloves, we are also told to just reuse, and even if they become smelly because of constant reuse. I asked our employer if they would give us PPEs other than the 4 masks, and they answered no. I did not insist on our need for masks and gloves for fear of being fired from work. It is hard being a caregiver in the time of COVID-19 because of the lack of benefits for caregivers like me. No work, no pay. But we really need to continue working because of family expenses. I live separately from my husband and kids, and it also an added stress not to be able to visit and see my children as I want to. Also, I worry a lot about what is going on back in our home country because we have a president who would rather order the police and military to kill drug peddlers and human rights defenders rather than provide mass testing and vaccination to the people. Now, many Filipinos are dying in their cars and homes because our overwhelmed hospitals cannot accommodate them. Thank you for giving me the time to share my life experience and situation. Mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you so much, Tita Fel, Clyde, and Tita Lala for sharing your story and for, it's been a really hard year. And so we have your back, and that's why we're here. So thank you so much for sharing. I want to pass it on to Michael Tayag to share our demands and our policy recommendations based off of the stories and the data that we gathered.
Thanks, Catherine, and thank you again to Tita Lala and Clyde for sharing your powerful story that the work that we are all doing here can help improve conditions in your workplaces and for your colleagues as well. So given the concerns that my colleagues presented before me, the report recommends policy changes to protect worker health and safety, as well as to bolster wage theft prevention and enforcement and to increase worker power and employer accountability. These recommendations are aimed at local policymakers in Santa Clara County and its cities, as well as state lawmakers. And I'll highlight some key recommendations here, but would point you all to the report for the complete list. The link again is in the chat. First, in the area of health and safety, state and local governments should ensure the provision of personal protective equipment to essential workers who may still be lacking them. And the county should deputize workers to enforce COVID-19 health. Moreover, the Wage Theft Coalition proposes that the state require just cause terminations for 6 months for businesses that have retaliated against a worker for reporting a COVID-19 health order violation. We also recommended requiring just cause terminations and layoffs by seniority for businesses struggling economically during the pandemic. Additionally, we call for the state and cities to enact, or in some cases reenact, paid sick leave due to COVID-19 with access to additional leave for workers who are reinfected. Second, as to wage theft enforcement, State and local government should ensure that they do not enter into contracts with any businesses with unpaid wage judgments. San Jose, Ruth mentioned earlier, already has an ordinance to this effect, but the city should remove the public works exemption given the prevalence of wage theft in the construction industry, as we see in the Silvery Towers human trafficking case. Moreover, the county and state should authorize agencies that issue permits or licenses to suspend those issued to wage theft violators. The county, as we've discussed, already suspends permits on a limited basis through its food permit enforcement program. The county should expand this program and establish a similar one for business licenses it issues. Similarly, cities throughout the county and the state should pass the Responsible Development Ordinance, allowing them to suspend or revoke building permits and certificates of occupancy for businesses with unpaid wage judgments. With regard to post-judgment, the county and state should provide for wage liens, which have been shown to improve collection rates. The state should also require the revocation or non-renewal of licenses for long-term care companies with unpaid wage judgments. Finally, beyond wage theft and the other discrete issues we highlight in our report, we call on local and state governments to enact policies that better enable workers to build political power in and out of the workplace, as the title of the report highlights. This is essential for workers to safeguard and advance their rights and welfare in an era of intensifying workplace deregulation. For example, we need statewide legislation to combat retaliation, which deters workers, especially low-wage immigrant and other marginalized workers, from bringing wage claims and raising other workplace concerns. And in the longer term, state and local governments play a critical role in studying and facilitating more transformative changes to employer-employee relations. In the report, for instance, we propose employer-funded wage theft insurance that would guarantee compensation for wage theft victims, industrial labor boards, as I believe Adam Weisberg will discuss shortly, and collective bargaining by sector. With that, I'll hand it back to Catherine. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Michael. As Michael mentioned, I'm going to hand it to Anna Weisberg, who is the SEIU campaign director, that will speak on the Fast Recovery Bill, or AB 257.
Hi, thanks so much for having me today. It was really great. Sorry to hear from Clyde and Lala. Ruth asked me to join the call today because Maria Maldonado and I don't know how many fast food workers are out striking right now to win safe working conditions and in support of AB 257, the Fast Recovery Act. They're up in Oakland at the East 12th Street McDonald's, where COVID, has not ended. Earlier this year, there was an outbreak, at least 9 workers. Nobody knows how many. It's really just exactly like what Clyde was saying. Management hides COVID, more workers get sick. They don't want to take responsibility. They don't want to pay for quarantine. They just hide the ball like it's the flu, and they treat the flu like it's nothing. This is the same store where the AC, I don't know if they've ever had an AC, the fans got taken away in 2019. 2 workers, including Maria Pinzon, who's striking today, had to leave work early, just March 31st because they were so sick with the heat. This is a store where workers are often not permitted to drink water. They get yelled at for drinking water. This has something in common with wage theft. All of this has something in common with wage theft. And that's that at the root of these issues is power. People don't get treated like this when they have power at work. People get treated like this when abusive employers think they can get away with it. And so we are working with fast food workers, and fast food workers are striking and raising their voice that we want to change the equation. We're supporting AB 257 this year, the Fast Recovery Act, which Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez introduced earlier this year. And so that does 2 things. One is it really gives workers voice and power in their industry. And the second is that it requires fast food giants, so these are companies like McDonald's and Burger King, to be on the hook to make sure that their franchisees have the resources that they need to be compliant and safe operations, and to take more responsibility for bringing their operations into compliance on wage theft with health and safety laws. So let me tell you real quick how it works. Just like the $15 minimum wage, government has the power to set all kinds of standards, right? Wages, health and safety, training standards, and so forth. But right now, those kind of things are like all over government. What AB 257 does is kind of streamline that process. It says that government should be able to kind of bring its authority to a single space, the Fast Food Sector Council, and then include industry and workers at that table. And then invite California's 500,000 fast food workers to actively participate, to mobilize, and to participate in raising their voice and setting the standards that are then going to prevail, just like a $15 minimum wage across their industry. And so, as I said, to go into just a little more detail, the bill also requires these giant companies to stop squeezing their franchisees into wage theft and non-compliance, right? Because that's what happens when you have a franchise system that's become kind of this runaway business where the parent company keeps all of the power, extracts as much money they want, and takes on none of the responsibility and none of the liability. So the law seeks to ensure that the franchisees actually have the resources that they need to operate lawfully, and the parent companies are required to take responsibility if they don't. So all told, the objective of the bill is to empower workers across the whole industry, bring a greater voice to workers across the entire industry, and hold these giant companies accountable to stop wage theft and to stop other abuses. And just to let you know, like the California Restaurant Association, the Chamber of Commerce, and the International Franchise Association are all coming out against, saying it's the end of the world, basically. We need you. It's really just going to take the whole community to understand it's a more complicated story. Power and voice is a more complicated story than 15. And we do, Senator Cortese, and you've been with fast food workers forever, low wage workers forever. Thanks so much, and let's win.
Yes, let's win. Thank you all so much to Adam, to all our speakers for putting in the work to really push for immigrant workers' rights and really shifting that balance of power towards building worker power and really pushing for our demands. I'm going to reshare again our worker stories link and also a link to the wage theft report. Everything that we shared today can be found in our website and in our report, including our policy recommendations. We have a few more minutes left, and maybe we can accept one to two questions if folks have them. And yes, thank you so much, Adam, for sharing this call to action. If folks are amped up and would like to join right after.
Yeah, we're actually up next in Santa Clara County. So if anyone wants to hop on the Zoom.
Awesome.
Also, the Wage Theft Coalition meets on the first Monday of the month at 5:30 p.m. And if you're interested, please let us know. I will put my email in the chat.
I wonder too if the other co-authors of the report could share their emails in case folks have follow-up questions after this briefing. So I'll do that.
Yeah, the other co-authors were Felwina and Forrest, Michael, Catherine, and I. Those are the 5 co-authors.
If folks don't have any questions or would like to just talk with the authors directly, as folks shared, our emails are in the chat. You all have the link to the website, to the report, if you want to look over those recommendations again. And as we close, I just really want to thank everyone who really put this together. I want to thank Clyde and Tita Lala for coming in after work, after dialysis, to really share your stories to everyone here. And I want to thank all of you who took your time out of your day to hear about a report, to hear about these worker stories. And we are in this together to build this movement for worker power. And with that, thank you so much, everyone. And please hop on to the Santa Clara County.
So I had a quick question.
Oh, awesome.
I'm sorry. I'm running late to the show. I'm super sorry. My name is Audrey Thomas. I'm Assistant Chapter Chief Steward with SCIU. And I just had a quick question with your organization. And do you guys have any successes, recent successes to share based on your activism? I know it's rough out there, but any Any shining light out there?
Yes, I don't know if you were there for my presentation, but we had a whole segment on all of our victories, and I can quickly go over them. We have had many successes. Almost all of our recommendations in our 2015 wage theft report were implemented. We recommended disclosure of unpaid wage theft judgments and revocation of business license and permits. And Santa Clara County, San Jose, Sunnyvale, Milpitas, Morgan Hill have enacted that legislation. Milpitas has enacted an ordinance that'll deny building permits and certificates of occupancy. We also wanted prohibitions on contracting with businesses with unpaid wage theft judgments. Same list have enacted it. We advocated for revocation of restaurant health permits if businesses don't pay judgments. Again, the OLSC was formed and they're doing that. And that was our advocacy. It took 3 years to get that going and convince people. We also advocated for outreach and education. And that was at our advocacy, a legal advice line, and it's supervised by a wage theft coalition attorney in English, Spanish, Tagalog, Visayan, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and Hindi Punjabi. And actually 3 coalition attorneys are on that. We also have a Fair Workplace Collaborative that supports community organizing, conducts outreach and education. We've partnered with Fight for 15 to advocate for a referral that will include establishment of an advisory council that includes workers and advocates and addresses abuses in the industry. We were the original sponsor of AB 1947 CALRA, when it was first introduced, and it increased the statute of limitations for retaliation, which is a huge problem, and allows for the court to award attorney's fees. We were also a co-sponsor of AB 3075, which closed the loophole where businesses could just close up and open again. It imposes successorship liability on an employer if it passes the business over to family members or has the same facility or workers or operation. And both of those were signed by the governor. So we have had successes, and we continue to advocate and go to various cities to get these enacted. And of course, we're supporting the Fast Recovery Act.
Thank you so much. Well done. Thank you.
Hi, Andre. But anyway, I have a quick question.
Sure.
Okay, so I've been in other groups where they're working on getting businesses, like the fast food businesses, to sign an agreement to take care of their workers. Do you know anything about that?
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so I think there's something going on where they're having companies, like the fast foods, sign on to ways to help and keep their workers safe and, be fair to them. And I've just kind of sat in or Zoomed in on one of those type of meetings. So I'm just wondering if you know of anything like that. I know we're trying to do legislation, bills and things like that, but on the more ground level, have you heard of anything like that?
I think that's what Adam is talking about in this bill, the Fast Recovery Act, where workers and employers across an industry, as well as government officials, would get together and try to craft and agree on standards for that specific industry. Adam, do you want to talk a little bit more about what that would look like?
I mean, the goal is to find ways, and there are innumerable ways. So there's the work that you're helping us and with in Santa Clara County, trying to figure out how do we work with government to set the stage for workers to weigh in on conditions. And then certainly at the state level, government has a lot of levers to convene and then ultimately to enact rules that come out of a discussion that really involves workers alongside employers in setting and raising the standards. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question.
Well, it might be something similar, but I was just wondering because I thought they were more direct agreements with the worker groups, and I mean not union type of things, but just worker groups, employees and employer, some type of an agreement where they come up with how things should be. So I mean, this might be part of it. So thank you.
Yeah, I think also you have agreements, for example, often around like development, like that Google development. It might be what you're
PLAs,
referencing.
progress, project labor agreements in the construction industry. That could be it. Could
Well,
be it
I
as
know it
well.
also included like, farm workers, things like that. So, but anyway, if I hear more about it, I'll just shoot you an email or something. Thanks.
Please do. Thank you.
Sounds good. I don't know if some of our co-authors want to stay on in case folks have any questions or like strategize, but I know folks had to head out at 11, including myself. But I just want to thank all of you for joining. If folks want to stay on, feel free to do so. I personally have to head out, unfortunately. But thank you all so much for your support.